repetitive. The Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting, Monday, June 9th. It is 12:01. Nice on time start. First item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone in the audience today, or Stephen, did we have anybody submit written comments?
We didn't have anybody request to speak this morning, but if there is anyone in attendance that would like to address the committee, you can use the raise hand function, and we'll keep an eye out for that for just a minute here.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing any hands.
I am not either. We'll go ahead and move on. We'll go ahead and do roll call then.
Okay, I'm giving the list one last scan here. I think we promoted everybody who's a member. So I'll start and we'll go alphabetically as we normally do by jurisdiction. So for City of Banks, Mayor Kirk.
Here.
Thank you. For Beaverton, I believe we are looking for Councilor Hartmeyer Craig today. So we'll keep an eye out for her. For Cornelius, Mayor Delane.
Present.
You. Thank you, sir. Let's see. I don't believe we have one of our Durham reps today. For Forest Grove, I saw Mayor Wenzel.
Yep, here.
Hillsborough, Councilor Harris.
Here.
Thank you. I don't believe we have a King City representative with us yet, so we'll keep an eye out there as well. For North Plains, I think we have Councilor Dumbro.
Present.
Thank you. City of Sherwood, Mayor Rosner.
I am here.
Thank you. City of Tigard, Mayor Lube.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Hello. For Tualatin, Mayor Bubenik.
Here.
Thank you. And for Wilsonville, Mayor O'Neill.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Washington County, Commissioner Fye.
Present.
Thank you. Metro, Councilor Rosenthal.
Yo. Here.
Thank you. For ODOT, Stephanie Turner.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you. Port of Portland, Dan Eisenbeis.
Here.
Thank you, Dan. And for TriMet, we'll keep an eye out, but I know our normal person, John Sarah, is out on paternity leave, so may not have a TriMet person with us today. So I think that concludes our roll call. As I said, we'll keep an eye out if others join a little bit later.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, well, let's jump right in. We got some action items today. First one is consideration of the meeting minutes from our May 12th meeting. Are there any changes, or do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded.
I think, okay, I got a motion from Commissioner Fye, and who was the second?
I don't think
that
I
was-
made the motion.
I'm
I
sorry?
think it was Mayor O'Neill.
Oh,
No.
I
it
made the
was-
motion. Sorry.
Oh,
Mayor Wenzel
sorry.
from Forest Grove made the motion, and Mayor O'Neill seconded it.
hard to-
What-
Say my name next time.
What the mayor said.
Yes, well, it's hard to keep track of all these squares, so thank you for keeping me straight here. Looks like we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye, raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Item B is Transportation Development Tax, TDT, and Transit Traffic Impact Fee, TIF expenditure request. Washington County and the cities of Beaverton, Hillsborough, and Cornelius, and Forest Grove request the expenditure of, move my cursor here, 10.225 million on TDT and/or transit TIF funds for the project development phase of the TV Highway Transit and Safety Project. Are there any questions, or do I have a motion on that as well?
I'll make the motion.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Fye and a second. Oh, question?
No, a seconded from Mayor
Oh,
Wenzel.
and a second from Mayor Wenzel. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And any abstentions? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and move into section 4, information and discussion section. We have Metro here to present their comprehensive climate action plan. And I think, Elliot, are you here? Good morning, Elliot. Thanks for coming to the meeting. Actually, I take that back. It's 6 minutes afternoon. It's good afternoon now. Welcome to the meeting, and we'll go ahead and let you take it away.
All right, sorry, folks. That was just me unmuting and making sure I'm sharing the presentation. Is it showing up okay on everyone's screens?
Yep, I can see it.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and for having me at WCCC today. My name is Elliot Rose. I'm a senior transportation planner at Metro, and I'm here to talk with you about the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. And I think I'll just dive right into talking about what that plan is and why we're doing it. So the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan is true to the name. It's the most comprehensive climate action plan that our region has ever created. It covers all sectors of greenhouse gas emissions, and the big ones for our region are transportation, buildings, and the stuff that people use. And it also covers the entire Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area. The plan is funded by a grant that Metro received from EPA in 2023, and it's going to contain the following elements, which are pretty common to climate action plans, including those that are being developed or on the books in Washington County. So like all those plans, this plan will have an inventory of our current climate emissions. It'll have projections of how those emissions change under the actions that are already in place, primarily at the state level in Oregon and Washington to benefit the climate. And then targets that really reflect what local and regional agencies need to do to reduce emissions in order to support those big state climate goals. And then crucially, a set of actions that really close the gap between where we need to be as a region in reducing and fighting climate change and where we're currently at. And, even I mentioned there's a lot of local climate work in the region. This is a chance to look at all that work, all that thinking together and figure out where those plans are aligned so that we can really collaborate to produce significant reductions in emissions that can be implemented by Metro and partners across the region. One final note, climate work is, I often talk about climate work in terms of mitigation, which means reducing the emissions that cause climate change, and adaptation, which is helping people continue to survive and thrive amid, some of the impacts of climate change. This plan's really focused on that first part on reducing emissions. There are other Metro bodies of work that focus more on adaptation and climate resilience. And if WCCC is interested in hearing more about those, I'm happy to follow up afterwards and see what I can do to bring in other Metro staff who are working on that. So there's a lot of engagement going on with this work, and I really wanted to start there because even if y'all WCCC members who I know are very busy haven't heard about this plan or been involved in it, it's likely that someone in your organization has been participating. A lot of the engagement we've done so far is through this body called the Climate Partners Forum, which is our main technical body steering this project. It's an open-ended group, which means that people can join as they wish and as they become aware of the project. That really consists of staff who do climate work at agencies and also nonprofits and environmental organizations around the region that really helps us review every deliverable that we come out with in the project. So I think in your packet, you have a list of the agencies that currently participate in that. And you also have my contact information. If you want to get added to the list, I'm happy to help you there. I also do a lot of one-on-one meeting with broader project partners, including utilities, businesses who have a stake, others who have a stake on reducing climate change and, maybe are a little focused on less focused on the big picture of this plan and more on a specific idea in the plan. I engage with them a lot one-on-one with folks who come in my circle. We hold public online open houses to get public feedback on how people in the region see these actions that we're considering for the plan benefiting them and their communities. And then finally, of course, to share out all this work with Metro's advisory committees and county coordinating committees. And thanks again for having me today. We've been doing a lot of the background analysis in the plan, and I should say that the stage we're at in the plan and the reason why I'm speaking with you today is because there's been a lot of the technical background work is falling into place, and we're preparing to release a draft plan over the summer. And WCCC, as well as members of the public and members of Metro committees, are all going to have the chance to offer feedback and help us finalize that plan. So I want to help bring you up to speed on the work that's happened so far so that you're prepared to engage and help your communities engage when we do that. So this is showing where greenhouse gas emissions come from in our region. And this is a deeply technical analysis with a lot of nuances and lengthy footnotes behind it. But the headline of this analysis really is that most of our emissions come from one of three places: buildings, transportation, and food, goods, and services that we use. That's not only where most of our emissions come from, but those are places where governments, particularly local and regional governments, have a lot of leverage over emissions. So those are the areas that we're focusing on in the plan. And the actions that we'll be sharing in the final plan all focus on reducing emissions from these three sources that contribute most of our region's climate pollution. So another part is kind of understanding where we need to get to be to do our part in meeting state climate goals. This is a kind of complicated side. I'm going to do my best to unpack it. Feel free to let me know if there are any questions about it. This orange line right here, I'm going to start us shown here. That represents the goals that Oregon and Washington have to reduce emissions. Those are big goals that involve getting 95% of getting us to 95% below 1990 emissions levels by 2050. It's a fancy way of saying that they require us to remove most of the carbon pollution from our current economy. It's a big lift. This green line up here is showing the actions, where our emissions would be if nobody in Oregon or Washington had done anything to tackle climate change. Now, the good news here is that even though that number I just said, 95% reduction in emissions by 2050, sounds really ambitious, we have a lot of policies in the state level, Oregon and Washington, and programs that are already underway: clean vehicle rebates, clean energy requirements, clean fuel and vehicle requirements, that are already setting in motion some fairly significant greenhouse gas reductions. So, after those policies and programs take their effect, we expect that locals and regions will have an additional 40% of additional reductions we need to make to kind of do our part in meeting these overall goals. So the good news is the goal for us when we start thinking about how we work in collaboration with the state to reduce emissions, it's maybe not as big as of a lift as we think as it would first seem to get to these big picture goals, because the state policies and programs are already underway are doing a lot. The challenge is that those programs are taking care of a lot of the switches to energy sources that could be behind the scenes and don't really require everyday people to change their behavior very much. And a lot of the things that we do as local and regional agencies are more about trying to get buildings more efficient, trying to help people find different ways to travel, things that require people to take a little bit of action in order to take up on them. And so, the good news is we have less of a gap to close than we thought. The challenge is that closing that gap is going to depend on changing people's behavior a little bit more than it's going to depend on changing their technology. And that's what we're good at the local regional level, but it can be a bigger lift. So we're building this plan on the backs of all the great climate action planning work that's come before us in the region. That includes community-based plans, local climate plans and projects, and the state's plan. The state's producing the same plan in parallel, and they also have a lot of existing documents that describe those existing policies and programs that I mentioned. And then we also have a lot of metro-led efforts that have been kind of meta plans about how we're going to reduce emissions in our own buildings and the waste system, in the transportation system. And so we're really looking across all these plans. I think we're reviewing around 15 or 16 local climate action plans last I checked, including a number from Washington County. And, we're really trying to draw every action and every idea in this plan from the existing work we've done rather than reinventing the wheel. And, the big challenge for these local efforts is that a lot of cities or counties, when they do their climate action plan, they see limited opportunities to do things like make transit bigger across the region and better across the region, or consider things like how we might find more money for the transit system, So a lot of these local plans hint at some big picture actions that require collective regional action and produce big emissions. That's really what we're focused on lifting up through this work. So as we've developed a lot of the actions in the plan, I'm sorry, I'm trying to switch to calling those things actions really consistently. Sometimes in the practice, they're called measures. I'm sorry I didn't update that on this slide. Measures and actions are the same thing. They're things that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're taking from that universe of available plans that I'm showing over here on the left. And then we're really looking at it in looking at those ideas through three different lenses that help us understand what's a good idea that belongs in this bigger picture regional plan. The first is analysis of the climate benefits and costs. That's something that is really technical and data driven and is led by our consulting team that's supporting us from Parametrics. The second is public feedback on which of these actions benefit communities, because that's one of the great things about climate work is we know that a lot of the things we might do to reduce emissions also save people money, and they also improve people's quality of life. And so a lot of what we collect through public feedback is helping us understand which of these actions have the biggest co-benefits. And then lastly, through that Climate Partners Forum I mentioned, that's where I get to talk with a lot of smart people around the region about, hey, how many resources do we really have for this work? What authority do we as governments and nonprofits really have to move it forward? How much can we really do with what we have? And so that's where I get a lot of feedback on what's feasible and how we really implement stuff. Every action that I'm about to summarize in the next slide scores really highly in one of these areas. It's either a really low cost way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, a way to benefit community members, or something that there's a really clear path to implementation on. Some of these actions even tick off two of those three boxes. It's hard to get all three because this work is challenging and multifaceted. So in the draft plan that we'll share in July, I'm just going to summarize what the measures are real quick. There is more detail in your packet if you want to see the individual draft measures right now. But in transportation, we have 11 measures. That's the most of any category. And that's, to me, seems like it's because we have a lot of coordination in transportation planning, as evidenced by groups like WCCC, that helps us figure out those collective actions and helps us give a really good, strong roster of potential actions to draw from. So the focus here is on transit and compact development. Those are the things our analysis is showing us best reduces greenhouse gas emissions, but they include other steps like changing how we price the transportation system, building bike ped projects. And all this work is really highly aligned with current transportation plans because of that tradition of coordinated transportation planning in the region. Building energy is the second biggest area of focus for this plan. There's 9 measures in there, and those really focus on retrofitting existing homes more than anything else, because that's what both our analysis and our outreach has told us that the biggest climate benefit and the biggest equity benefit is, since if someone's in an old home that's hemorrhaging heat and cool air, that's costing them a lot of money. These actions also include things like street trees, which helps to reduce building heating and cooling loads by shading buildings, requirements for new buildings, rooftop solar, other steps to reduce emissions from building. This is really interesting because there's a lot of state and local work going on in building energy, but it's been less of a focus at the metro table. And then lastly, we have foods, goods, and services, which is kind of a new area in climate work. I've been doing this work for about 2 decades now, and accounting for the emissions that get produced elsewhere when people in our region buy stuff is a little bit trickier than accounting for the emissions that get produced here when we purchase fuel off the grid for our buildings or when we drive vehicles. And so we're learning a lot more about these emissions, and we're finding that the best we can do is to reuse high impact materials like electronics. That can also really save people money, right? Getting a used computer instead of a new one, and avoiding food waste, which is another not only big emissions winner, but helps people save money in the end. It also includes sustainable procurement for governments, policies that promote low carbon building materials. And it's aligned with the regional waste planning that Metro does to coordinate waste management in the metro region. even if we do all this stuff, the analysis is telling us that there may be further collective action to meet our targets. And that's not because these actions I'm showing you don't matter, but because there's some specialized sources of emissions that are really persistent that we just can't get at without coordination with the state and other entities that have the power to regulate really specific sources of fuel and emissions in a way that we as local governments traditionally don't. So here's what's ahead. I know that was kind of a lightning introduction to this work. I'm really curious for any feedback and questions you have on this work. I know we're in June. Sorry, I also delivered this presentation to another committee in May. And then in July, we'll be sharing out the draft plan at Metro committees, and I'm happy to come back to WCCC and share out the complete draft plan as well. In August, we'll be inviting both members of the public and participants in committees like these to participate in an online open house and public comment opportunity where you can give us feedback on the plan. And then in September, we'll be doing a run to catch final feedback from our committees on the draft plan before we create a final version to bring to Metro Council for action. So I know there was a lot of information. Please feel free to ask any questions that came to mind. In particular, though, if you have thoughts about like actions that you think should be a key focus in this plan, it's helpful for me to know that today. Or if there's any questions you have about how to engage with this process, because like I said, we have a variety of scales of engagement from technical and public all the way up to decision maker. And we really want to make sure that if your organization's engaged in climate work, that you're able to help come to our table and help us understand how we can support you. So thank you for the time today. I'm going to drop us out of screen share.
All right. Thank you very much, Elliot. Any questions for Elliot? Mayor Lube.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot, for your time today. I want to also emphasize, right, the transportation improvements help us reach these goals by providing safe multimodal ways to connect that also, help individuals get singularly off the road and how that plays into this plan as well.
Great, thank you. I mean, that's something we've heard a lot about from people when we asked about co-benefits and, in the first community survey, we put a kind of big list of simple actions in front of people and asked them, do you see these as beneficial to people you know? And transit in particular popped for that reason. People are thinking about being able to access destinations conveniently and safely. We heard about public safety on the transportation system and also the way in which those active transportation projects like bike ped facilities contribute to that.
All right. Thank you. Mayor Bubanek.
Elliot, we're in Tualatin. We just concluded our climate action plan development, and we're now transitioning to implementation. And we've got some strategies and actions similar to what you were talking about. We're about to hire someone, a full-time staffer, to run our climate action plan. So I'll mention it to Sherilyn, our city manager, that we work with your office because especially if we can jointly work on things, especially when it comes to what you're saying, your measures here, if it's something that's a common measure that we have. I'd love to dovetail this together, but rather than us doing it independently of Metro, there's things we can work on together and maybe advance yours plus our action plan. I would look forward to doing that.
Thank you so much, Mayor Bubanek. I just took a note. I pulled up where you're talking to see who's representing Tualatin on the forum. And I see Nick Westendorf and Steve Coper from your staff. And so I'll follow up with them about that and make sure I have the latest and greatest on their plan, on the Tualatin's plan.
Yeah, we just passed the funding mechanism for this person during this budget process, so they'll be hiring someone soon.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Deline.
Thanks, Elliot. Good presentation. I'm glad to see where it's funny. I see the wood stove over Tim's shoulder there in his background picture. I'm interested to see what the 18, we're focused on houses, right? That's one of the things besides transportation, because think you and I have talked in the past about the transportation challenges for those of us out on the edge, right? We get long commutes, a lot of people. So, buses and bikes will get some of that, but I think the housing focus is a good one because we have a economically disadvantaged community with there are people that are still heating with wood stoves, right? Or they've got, you know, old heating or air conditioning or lack of insulation. So I'm really interested to see how this digs down into the actual actions, right? What are you thinking we're going to do and where do you think we're going to do it to be able to help these folks turn the corner? Because you're right, if we can get better insulation in a house, then it costs them less to heat it or air condition it, right? So interested to see where those rubber hit the road activities are going to be.
Yeah, I'm really interested as too. I'm learning a lot about buildings. I will say the biggest opportunity I've heard, and I welcome reflections on this from folks. Like we have a lot of programs to support energy efficiency already through Energy Trust of Oregon and through local programs. But what I've heard from folks who know this space better than I do is that it's a real patchwork. And first and foremost, there's a big need to just for folks to be able to better navigate to the programs that benefit their community and apply to the types of things that they want to improve about their buildings. And there's a lot of other, ideas on top of that, but that really seems like the lowest hanging fruit for our region in the list because, that's something we have a good tradition of doing through other kind of programs where we collaborate to help people navigate to transit services or recycling or other types of things that they can use that benefit them.
All right, Mayor Kirk. You're on mute, Mayor Kirk.
Sorry.
Hmm.
Hi, Elliot. I'm not sure if you know that both myself and Counselor Aaron aren't within Metro. So this is probably the first that we've seen this. Because thanks to North Plains, but also I guess the whole group, I wanted to make sure that they knew that obviously it's something we also would probably like to get in on, or at least the transportation type stuff. Maybe if the transportation would be more in Washington County purview versus this Metro, because probably worse than Cornelius is any of the transit North Plains has it better than we do. And I don't know if you had heard the rumor that in the next 5 to 8 years, we're probably going to have 1,100 new houses out here. So just to let you know, and I know there's no magical barriers where we're going to be able to keep our diesel emissions out of your guys' territory. So if we can maybe work a little bit more together on a few things on this, because this is, even though I've been on city council and I am new to mayor, this is the first I've actually ever seen it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that comment, Mayor Kirk. I really appreciate it. If there are staff at banks who I should be reaching out to make sure that we're coordinated with them as we develop this, I would love to follow up with those folks just as a start. Because I do think, even though you and Mayor DeLim both highlighted the challenges of transportation, further out from the urban areas of the region, there still is a bike ped network. There still are opportunities out there. And as he highlighted, there's a lot of building related elements. I'd be really curious about, particularly, as you said, you're a city that's growing a lot. And so you have a chance to maybe affect how that new growth produces emissions. So I'm going to follow up. Who's the best way to follow? Is there a good way to follow up on that, Chair Roberts?
Basically, my city manager is probably the best.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Commissioner Fye.
Elliot, great presentation. I don't actually have question for you, but rather a suggestion, something to consider. You know, we elected get a lot of preparation materials and briefings from our staff, and I was really impressed to some of the materials that was shared with me that I read, that the staff in particular, the highlights from other staff level meetings, the MTAC and the WCCC TAC. And I wonder if you could entertain or take the idea back to come up with a frequently asked question document where you answer these questions, and track some of these questions, and then we can share with our constituents so that we can disseminate some of these information to constituents, and we help you at the ground level to beef up some of the engagements that you're looking from Washington County. In particular, some of the highlights I read in the materials, my briefing materials, was around congestion pricing, something that I put it out of my mind because it got stopped, but it be really be beneficial if you could have somewhat of frequently asked question document where we can track all these informations and then keep it updated. And it's just something that was curious to me around the price, congestion pricing. Like, what is happening? How does that fit into this? And where will the political work that is needed will come? I know it's not a question we need to answer today and something that isn't at the table right now, but those are some of the highlights that caught my attention when I was reading my briefing materials. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was a frequently asked question document where we can track and continue to update? So all that to say, FAQ, Elliot.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. I just heard so much about, as I've been doing this, about how complicated this work is and how important it is to like lift up kind of what's true and what works. I would love to, are you referring to the packet for WCCC today?
I'm referring to my briefing materials separate,
Okay.
but I'm sure we can share some of those highlights and you can
Okay. Yeah, if there's any way I
collating the
could,
answers. Yeah.
I would love to see what you're looking at and what you found useful, because we are really trying. That's been a demand I've heard from many quarters, is to just really take this opportunity and this plan to just kind of update our thinking and how we communicate around climate issues. This stuff is so complex and so dynamic.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had seen it. I don't see any more questions from the floor. I had a couple of questions. In the groups that you worked with to come up with this initial draft that you'll be presenting, I guess next month, did you include economic development voices? And the reason I mention that is, we've in Sherwood we've had a lot of success with economic development, but we're just rearranging the deck chairs. It's companies moving around the Portland metro area. Where we struggle attracting companies from out of state. So do we have a lens of looking at what some of these policies do in terms of, are there positive things, suggestions that could help bring outside investment into the region, and then of course the other side of that is, are we going to have policies that may discourage companies to, decide to come here and set up shop? I was wondering if that was part of your view into the strategy.
One of the things that I've heard, what we say about particularly those emissions from, so you're talking in climate language about emissions from commercial and industrial property, and
Sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Like in Sherwood, we're
yeah.
focused on what we call clean companies, for lack of a better term. But I'm just curious, given that we're competing with New York, Phoenix, the Carolinas, Ohio, et cetera, how you guys look at that?
Yeah, I mean, we do. So this is really helpful actually, because one of the things that I'm getting support on is this plan does have like a workforce development analysis that's required. Maybe a little different from the economic development analysis, but I'm putting that question in the queue for David Tetrick, who's supporting that. What I'll say, like kind of more from the climate perspective, is at the local regional level, when it comes to climate, I don't see any examples, and please correct me if I'm wrong, of like governments placing hard regulations, environmental regulations of any sort on commercial and industrial development. That's something that DEQ might do, but it's not something that we do as a region. And when I look at what's going well in the region, especially at the local and regional level, it's these partnership programs. And there's probably some great examples in Washington County of folks that folks came to mind, but like Gresham has a great one. They just have a full-time, staffer who's going around to their different existing commercial and industrial partners and, talking with them about ways to reduce emissions in a way that's really, even though it's kind of voluntary shoe leather, produced a lot of benefits, and there's other cities with those types of programs too. And that's really, in what we've heard about is that there's not enough leverage, there's not a lot of leverage at the local and regional level to influence this by regulation and requirement. And we really need to start with a partnership focus that, I think is kind of implicitly designed to be more supportive of the type of concerns you're bringing up, where, hey, we're just being friendly partners from the government trying to help these businesses save a little extra money on their energy bills and build cool civic partnerships. We're not trying to condition whether people locate on this
Yeah,
stuff.
and I didn't want to imply that I thought that's where you were going. I think the carrots are the best way to do it and finding those partnerships, but I was just curious if there was a lens for that. And then just one real quick question. And this is a little bit anecdotal, but I'm occasionally getting phone calls now, but several of the major residential, HVAC companies have been bought up by national private equity firms, and we've seen just incredible price hikes that are occurring. And I'm curious if you're also looking at strategies for encouraging lowering costs in those areas, because it's easy for us to say, hey, put in a heat pump, but the cost of putting in retrofitting a heat pump is pretty prohibitive for most families.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really great question. That's an issue I am hearing a lot about and learning a lot about. You know, Still trying to wrap my head around as a transportation planner what this all means. But like, uh, I feel like what I'm learning through this plan is that working on housing and getting housing to be more efficient is really urgent because, that building's every year you don't do it. That building's just producing more emissions and the people are spending more money too. So there's a lot of urgency, and that urgency feels like it's colliding with the issues you're talking about, where because of these issues, because of supply chain issues and the way inflation's hitting the building sector, there's a general lack of contractors right now. Uh, that what used to work doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like we can follow the same playbook as we were 5 years ago for this stuff.
Awesome.
And so, yeah.
No, that's great. I'm glad you guys have that in the back of your mind as you're going through that, because it's an important issue. Well, Elliot, thank you so much for coming today. Great presentation, great materials ahead of the meeting. I think we don't have any more questions, so you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, or you can duck out if you want to. We're going to move on if that's okay.
Thanks for your time today.
All right. Thanks, Elliot. All right. Our next item on the agenda is the RFFA Step 1 bond scenario refinement. We have Grace Cho from Metro. Hi, Grace. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you so much. I am just about to share my screen for a presentation. I'm hoping that you're able to see it here. Let's see if it's sharing. Are folks able to see that at the moment? Just about to get it into a
Yes.
slideshow mode.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much, members of WCCC, for having me today. My name is Grace Cho, and I'm a principal transportation planner at Metro. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here today to share a few updates and gather your feedback on the 28 through 30 Regional Flexible Fund new project bond proposal, as well as our Step 2 competitive allocation. With a lot to cover, I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. So today, as it relates to the Regional Flexible Fund bond proposal, I'll be going over 4 different updates. A number of the details as it relates to these updates were actually included as part of the upcoming June 12th JPAC packet. So the first I'll start off with is a bit of good news, and it has implications for both the new project bond proposal as well as the step two allocation. The good news is that Metro staff's most recent estimate of regional flexible funds available for the 28 through 30 cycle has actually increased from about 150-ish million to about $161 million. The increase is actually connected to two different factors. The first is actually what we call unallocated carryover. And then the other is an increase in congestion mitigation and air quality funds, often referred to as CMAQ, which is one of the sources of funding that comprises the regional flexible funds. So just explaining a touch about these two items, unallocated carryover represents the difference between what's initially estimated in regional flexible fund revenues and the difference of that in terms of what actually results through the annual appropriations process. Since 2022, Metro's mildly conservative forecast has actually added up to a $6 million increase over the course of the last 3 years. And our typical approach with something like unallocated carryover is to allocate it as part of the next regional flexible fund cycle, which in this case, we're talking about the 28 through 30 cycle. Somewhat similar with CMAQ, Metro staff received an appropriation of CMAQ funds earlier this spring. The amount increased in terms of that appropriation by about $700,000. So using this most recent appropriation number for CMAQ, Metro staff have updated our forecast to reflect this increased amount. This increased amount of CMAQ is now resulting in an additional approximately $4.5 million to be able to allocate. So with this increased capacity in the anywhere you could say from $8 to $11 million range from our initial estimate, Metro staff is actually proposing to use the funds to support the new debt service resulting from the new $88.5 million Regional Flexible Fund bond. These increased funds, some of which are available now, will be able to cover those early year debt payments, and it would ultimately free up some of the funding from step two, which had initially been anticipated for debt service to then instead allocate as part of the step two process. So what this means as it relates to our step two allocation is that our initial estimate of $42 million actually increases to $49 million. So we'll have about an extra $7 million to be able to allocate as part of that process. So now, having gone through the first big item in terms of updates, I'm just going to briefly touch on the bonding funding mechanisms and just give a brief update here. As the region inches closer to taking an action to commit to a new project bond, the previous paradigm of how regional flexible fund bonds had been issued and executed will be different this time around. This is in large part because Metro or a delegated agency will be taking on the role of being the bonding entity or essentially the borrower, which is new. So I just wanted to take a brief moment to explain a little difference in the roles between Metro serving as in the Metropolitan Planning Organization capacity, and then Metro as a public agency, and those two different roles and how they'll play in the implementation of this new bond. So just starting with the MPO. The MPO serves as the decision-making body to award regional flexible funds to projects and programs. Essentially, the MPO is dictating the decisions around how we're going to use regional flexible funds. This includes a decision to bond regional flexible funds for advancing revenues and committing to a long-term debt servicing structure. The MPO decision-making is a shared function between JPAC and the Metro Council. So essentially those decisions as it relates to how to use those regional flexible funds solely lie within that JPAC and Metro Council function. This slightly differs for Metro or a delegated agency who will be taking on this bonding entity or borrower role. The bonding entity will really be holding the decision-making functions over the bond actions themselves, such as when to issue different bonds, and ultimately hold all the administrative responsibilities and financial liabilities. It's not within the bonding entity's purview to make decisions on how to use the regional flexible fund bond proceeds or to reallocate those bond proceeds if for some reason that needed to occur. The allocation or decision still, again, just reiterating, sits within that MPO role. So beyond just rules, there are a few other funding mechanisms considerations still in need of resolution in order to implement this new regional flexible fund bond. One in particular is going to be securing a federal to local fund exchange. Much of the financial assumptions for the new regional flexible fund bond proposal were built upon being able to execute a single bond on the local bond market. Since flexible funds are federal dollars, they're not going to be eligible to go on that local bond market. So while not a requirement to take an action to commit to a bond and allocate proceeds to actual projects, so that upcoming decision that's at hand, we know that this is one of the first implementation steps that we will need to resolve is securing those fund exchanges. In addition, there are a number of intergovernmental agreements which will need to be executed prior to being able to issue those bond proceeds to projects. So that's another step that will be taking place following action on the Regional Flexible Fund new project bond. And then, of course, there's proceeding with the actual bond issuance and defining some of those details as it relates to being able to issue those bonds. So covering 2 of those 4 updates, let me now just briefly note that released this month at the regional committee, so for the upcoming June 12th JPAC committee meeting, as well as last week's TPAC committee meeting, are the draft legislative materials for review ahead of next month's requested action on the Regional Flexible Fund bond. Included as part of the draft legislative packet are essentially 5 items: a draft resolution, an Exhibit A, which outlines the bond proceed allocation to individual projects, as well as the long-term debt servicing schedule. Exhibit B, which is the conditions of approval. And then Exhibit C and D are both related to the public comment on the Regional Flexible Fund bond proposal. C is the public comment report, and D are the appendices to that report. I just want to note that Exhibit B encompasses probably the most content, as it outlines the conditions of approval and efforts to ensure that the implementation of this new Regional Flexible Fund bond continues to meet our adopted bond purpose and principles that were part of our program direction for this cycle. And these draft conditions of approval have been shared with our bond recipient lead agencies, and we're receiving comments, and we anticipate probably some revisions and such to come. Now, getting to the last update as it relates to the topic of the bond, the 28 through 30 Regional Flexible Funds bond proposal public comment report was released on May 30th. As WCCC members may be aware, Metro held a 5-week public comment this spring on the Regional Flexible Fund bond proposal, as well as our Step 2 candidate projects. For the bond proposal, Metro utilized an online open house format to create a learning opportunity about transportation funding in general, and why funding strategies like bonding are important, and also about the candidate projects themselves for bond proceeds. A comment box with 2 open-ended questions and the ability to leave project-specific comments lended to an online open house, receiving over 500 comments, many of which were directed at the different proposed projects for bond proceeds. There were also emailed comments, letters, and public testimony that was received. The public testimony was at the April 17th JPAC meeting. Those efforts actually garnered another 72 additional comments. And of interest probably to members of the coordinating committee here today, the Tualatin Valley Highway Transit Project did receive 56 total comments. Since the comments collected during the public comment were all more in an open text-based format, Metro staff went through and read through those comments to identify the different themes to emerge from those comments received. Listed here are 6 which came up most through those comments. And I just want to note again, the public comment report does have, especially the appendices, has all the individual comments themselves in their first format. And so if you'd like to look at those, they're all available on our Regional Flexible Fund webpage. So now that I've shared some updates about the Regional Flexible Fund bond, I'm going to transition over to step 2 and just cover a couple of items here. Just as a brief reminder, the desired outcome from our step 2 competitive allocation process is to make progress towards the goals identified in the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan and to meet the objectives set forth this allocation cycle as adopted in the program direction. So how we're doing that is by developing a step 2 allocation package, which incorporates and balances across five components reflective of those desired outcomes. These 5 pieces of information include the program direction objectives, the technical evaluation results, the public comment on the applications received, input and direction to help input on concepts to help us build different step 2 package options, which I'll be going over today. And then lastly, indication of coordinating, the last item being a optional or voluntary item, indication of the coordinating committees and the City of Portland's priority application or application. So today, I'm just giving a brief overview of the 3 different step 2 allocation package options, which attempt to apply at least 4 out of the 5 pieces of information that we had at the time of last week when we were first presenting these at TPAC. And we plan to provide revised, updated materials when this topic goes to JPAC at the June 26th meeting, June being a little bit of a weird month with 2 JPAC meetings. So first, briefly walking through the logic of how we developed these different package options. In trying to apply the components to help inform those allocation package options, an assessment rubric was developed defining different criteria and to organize and understand how each step 2 application meets the different components. From what's presented here on the screen, the assessment rubric took some simple quantitative approaches in certain areas, such as with the public comment, as well as with the technical evaluation results. But then certain areas like the program direction, as well as the concepts input that we received at the committee meetings last month, there were a number of subcomponents that we were incorporating and factoring in. I want to also stress that the version of the options being presented today do not incorporate the coordinating committee and the City of Portland priorities, as those were received late last week. So we just haven't had a chance to reflect that in the materials. And then I believe the Step 2 materials may have been provided as part of today's WCCC packet. So if there is a desire to look more closely at the rubric and the summary of the results across the applications, all of that's included as part of attachment 1 to the memorandum. So starting with the first of 3 step 2 allocation package options, coming in at a total of 47.8 million, allocation package option 1 emphasizes high performance across the 4 component areas with some additional focus on the overall technical evaluation score. I just noted here and bolded the applications that are in the Washington County area of the region. The 9 projects that make up this option meet more than half of the program direction objectives and consideration brought forward in the illustrative concepts input. And of the 3 step 2 allocation package options, option 1 is most closely aligned with input that Metro staff received from TPAC and JPAC members in May with respect to emphasizing or focusing an allocation package option, an allocation package that reflects the technical evaluation results. The second step 2 allocation package option coming in a little under 49 million emphasizes, again, high performance across the outcomes evaluation and the program direction objectives while taking into consideration JPAC input on the illustrative concepts. In particular, option 2 included the step 2 applications that complement recently built, currently active, or candidate projects in the Regional Flexible Fund bond capital projects. So they were trying to marry some alignment in terms of those different areas. Again, I'm just noting here, in bold are the projects that are in the Washington County area. And then lastly, the third package option continues to emphasize high performance in the outcomes evaluation program direction objectives. It meets a number of the illustrative concepts input that was received. But what differentiates option 3 is that it's giving a bit of a nod to the public comment by including the highest rated step 2 application that also performed highly in the technical evaluation and meets a number of those program direction objectives. So just a note of the 3 allocation package options, option 3 is the only one to come in a little greater than that $49 million mark that we are aiming for. So I may have mentioned that at last Friday, so that is June 6th, TPAC had the opportunity to see and discuss the step 2 allocation package options and give their feedback and direction to staff. And that information is being carried forward to incorporate as part of the materials for the June 26th JPAC meeting. Just noting here, different members of TPAC had really different preferences for the different options and provided comments as to what they would like to see maybe modified to be able to get to a staff recommended option. I just, based off of what you're seeing here, to a certain extent, there wasn't necessarily any general consensus around a single option itself, but it seems like there are still, I guess, options within the options to be able to bring forward a staff recommendation. In addition to the comments regarding preference around the different allocation package options, there were some further comments that were in regards to wanting to see a more integrated approach in terms of our allocation of step 2 with the Regional Flexible Fund bond consideration, as well as questions about work came up about the updated revenue estimates and the decision process. So now that I've gone through both of those, I'm just going to briefly touch on next steps so we can get to discussion. A short overview of the next steps. In June, starting with the Regional Flexible Fund bond proposal, at the June 12th meeting, JPAC will receive a similar presentation as to what was shared today at WCCC, and really just wanting to emphasize that the flexible fund materials are being broken up by the different JPAC dates this month. And then following our June 12th meeting, we'll actually be working on finalizing our legislative materials to bring those forward in July. As it relates to step two, we'll be sharing these options at coordinating committees that have requested us to come ahead of the June 12th JPAC meeting. We'll be taking that information as well as the direction from TPAC, and we'll hopefully be able to incorporate that into a set of revised step two materials that we would like to bring forward for certain at the June 26th JPAC meeting, if we're lucky, at the June 17th Metro Council work session next week. All this then leading us towards July being a month that we'll be requesting action as part of two separate resolutions to approve the bond as well as the step two allocation of projects. So that is the list here of the committees that we'll be going to requesting action, and then the council meeting where we will request adoption. So with that, I'm just laying out two discussion questions, or I guess three technically. One, they're set up by each area, but essentially, as it relates to the bond, we just want to understand what questions are in need of resolution prior to that July JPAC meeting before we request action. And then as it relates to step two, we're still taking some direction on shaping that step two staff recommendation that we want to bring forward in July. And so what information should Metro staff know in building that step two package, and if there's a preferred package. With that, I will end the slideshow and happily take any questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Grace, for the presentation. Questions for Grace? Mayor Lube.
Hi, everyone. I don't really have questions. I have pretty strong feelings about which package we should go forward with. I hope it's no surprise to everybody on this call. We've been talking a lot this several months about the importance of the public comment. I'm not going to lie, part of it is because my project also received the highest average project rating, I think, which is a pretty big deal for people who say that it's important to them and it's going to impact their lives. A couple of other things I just want to point out for our North Dakota Bridge is this is the last money in. We're not looking for anything else after this. This is going to be able to have our project built. It has a lot of environmental impacts because the bridge needs to be raised. It is expanding the bridge in order to produce multimodal transportation. There's lots of really good things about this bridge that is, quite frankly, dangerously close to not being built and having to be shut down and have some pretty massive traffic impacts to the city of Tigard. But on top of that, I think just the importance of asking our community for opinion and not taking it into consideration really breaks the trust between government and community members. And I think if we're going to ask for all of the projects who were highly rated by community members and highly rated, by the project team, to move those forward. So I'm in favor of option 3.
Thank you, Mayor. Other questions or comments? Because we definitely want to give feedback to our representatives on JPAC so they can take that forward to the meeting. Stephen.
Chair, I just wanted to mention too, we have our TPAC reps are all in attendance. If the committee is interested in just hearing some perspective from the staff members that participated in the TPAC meeting, we're happy to do that.
That would be great if you could share.
Okay, yeah. So I'll ask Teresa or Jessica to go ahead and promote those folks.
And once they're promoted, Stephen, I'll let you go ahead and introduce them.
Great.
I find it amazing that Mayor Lube is the only one that has feedback on this particular topic.
Okay, I think we have our TPAC folks on. So we have Diami Valentine from Washington County, Greg Snyder from City of Hillsborough, who's the Cities of Washington County alternate, and Mike McCarthy, who's the Cities of Washington County representative. So I'll turn it over to you three.
All right, well, maybe I'll start. Good afternoon. I'm Mike McCarthy with the City of Tualatin. And as the TBAC rep, we looked at the three packages for the step two. And as you may have observed, uh, option three had three different projects in Washington County. Option two had three different projects in Washington County. Option one had two projects in Washington County. And from what we've seen, we think option one doesn't really give Washington County kind of the fair share of the funding regionally. Uh, there were a couple notable projects in that option one calculation. The Beaverton Creek Trail was what would have been within the range, but was left out of the package. And then the North Dakota Bridge was like just below the cutoff for the package. So we made the comment at the meeting that we didn't find option one acceptable and that one of those two projects would need to be added to get to where we felt like we were getting a fair share.
I'll just follow up to say that at the TAC, we want to promote Washington County projects that are going to make a difference. And we did discuss things like last money in and delivery risk. And importantly, the concept of public involvement. We've asked all those people to really rate each project on a 5-star scale. And using their input was really an important element. And that, I think, is reflected in Mayor Loob's comments as well. And so option three does that the most. I don't like the title that says a nod to public involvement, to be honest, because I think public involvement is more, we need to incorporate it more than just a nod. And thus, I think option three represents our interests in the best way we can this time around.
And that was another comment we brought up at the meeting was if we're going to ask hundreds, thousands of people to take the time to fill out a survey and write in their comments, and find where the projects are on the page and get themselves educated about the projects. If we're going to ask them to take that much time, we should be listening to what they're saying.
Awesome. Any questions for our members here from TPAC, or I'm sorry, the TAC? Or what do you guys call yourself? I always forget. The TAC, the WCCC TAC. Mayor Bubinek.
So in Grace's last slide, it seemed like I'm wearing both hats here, Clackamas County and Washington County. The Clackamas County was preferring option three with the ask of adding the Oregon City project, which looks to be about 4 million. So I got two questions. One is, did the Washington County TAC discuss that at all about package number three with the ask that Oregon City be added? And for Grace, it looks like that would bump it up now to almost 54 million. Is there any extra capacity? As you said, this was over what we were anticipating. So how could we, if we all want option three and it is over the budget amount, and to make Clackamas County happy, if you throw Oregon City in there, how are you going to make the dollars add up? So question first for the TAC and then for Grace.
Mike, do you want to take a shot at that?
I don't think we discussed the inclusion of the Oregon City project when we had our TAC meeting.
Okay.
And then in response to the question at hand in regards to the allocation of option three with adding the Oregon City project, $49 million is the estimate amount that we believe is available for allocating to capital projects through our step two allocation. We could end up with another surprise where we find ourselves with maybe more than what we initially forecasted in those years. We could end up in a position where we maybe find ourselves closer to or ever so slightly less. We tend to be our team, having done this for a number of years, tends to, I think, balance those considerations of trying to allocate as give an estimate that's as close to recognizing the state of reality of things. With that said, if more than the amount than what we estimate gets allocated for that cycle, it just takes from the next cycle. So we would have to reduce the dollar amount in the 31 through 33, which we don't want to, ideally, we don't want to take that choice away from those future candidate projects either.
So the 49, it's like the 49 and a half right now, is that the max limit right now you're anticipating? Because I thought you said there was a little bit over what you wanted to spend.
It is in the sense that we've estimated about $49 million. This one's closer to 49 and a half. Is this something we could potentially absorb? It's probably feasible. Again, it's every dollar that we end up over allocating that from our estimate just means that there's some risk that we're either pulling it from a future cycle, or we're kind of hoping for the best case scenario where our estimate was a little bit under, and what we actually see is the actuals are coming in a little higher.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. It sounds, I mean, we have a few people who spoke up. Sounds like there's general support for option 3, maybe with the caveat for Oregon City. Like Jeff, I'm surprised there's not more comments. Is there, Frank?
I mean, it's quiet. I mean, obviously, I'm leaning towards option number 3. Again, because it has the most projects, most dollars going to Washington County. Of course, we want to support Tigard in their ask. But again, yeah, it's the $500,000 Metro might be able to find. But I'm looking, if we can get this over the finish line with Clackamas County and Washington County, both like in option number 3, I think that'd be fantastic. Especially if, City of Portland wants option number 1, Jeff is going to have to battle it out with them. As usual, the Washington County, Clackamas County versus City of Portland kind of thing he's got to deal with at JPAC meeting. So, yeah, I'm in favor of 3. If somehow we can get Oregon City on, that project on board, and then you have the 2 counties, hand in hand going at this, I think it'd be terrific to go into JPAC with that mindset, and then maybe with the 2 counties aligned, I know it doesn't work this way all the time, that we can get to number 3.
Thanks,
I think you've accurately called it there, Mayor Bubinek. It's going to be the 2 counties versus Portland.
Yep.
Shocking, like that ever happens ever at JPAC. So I have a clear message to carry on Thursday that we're for option 3. Looks like Rob's going to lean in here and give us some feedback too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. And I'm new to this, but I did study this a little bit and looking at this. And, I agree with Greg Snyder from, probably unsurprisingly, from Hillsborough staff. Option 1 just looks like you do use technical scores, then you took out somebody and you threw in Clackamas County project to give them something. I mean, that's frankly what it looks like. And from an optics standpoint, obviously, I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's what if you look at the numbers, that's what it looks like. And I agree that we really need to incorporate public comment into this more. 1 does not do that, as far as I can tell, much at all. I'm sure it does, but it didn't seem to change the technical scores. But 2 and 3 seem more consistent with a combination of technical scores and public comment. And maybe not coincidentally, maybe so, it's more balanced allocation between the different jurisdictions. So yeah, 3 is fine. 2 is probably okay, but 1 I'd be a no on.
Thank you. Mayor O'Neill.
3 is fine. I mean, I serve on C4 in this body. And so I'll be frank, I know it's self-serving, but we just need to get these projects off the list because Wilsville's got a project it would like to get on the list at some point. And I know you guys hear it to me over and over again, the Boone Bridge. So we want is to someday have that addressed. And the only way to get it addressed is to get supporting these projects getting completed. And so we're all about that.
Thank you. Any other comments before I give my 2 cents? The only thing I'll add, I tend to, Grace, go ahead.
I apologize. Just briefly, because it's an unusual 2 JPAC meeting month, this is a rarity. I did want to note that the upcoming meeting on the 12th will only be covering the bond topic, and the input today is helping me as I revise materials for the June 26th meeting. So I really appreciate the time and getting that. I just wanted to note that if you don't see anything or you're like wondering, this is actually on the agenda for the end of the month.
Thank you for that. I guess I'll just add on the bonding topic. I'm assuming the interest rates are where we need them to be. I'm always in favor of bonding and moving projects ahead as fast as possible because the cost of construction inflation is way more than what we pay in interest on those bonds. So I think there's a little bit of an argument there to include Clackamas County's project in the list on top of the projects that are already there for option 3. None of these projects are in Sherwood, so I'm going to claim unbiased neutral observer and say option 3 is the best option. So we need to support Tigert and a fair distribution to the 3 counties. So that's kind of where my thoughts are on this. So Jeff, it sounds like you have a chore in front of you.
As Grace brought up, right? It's we'll talk about the second level at the end of the month, but it won't go unnoticed at the decisions being made on the first month's meeting.
Awesome, thank you. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, we'll go out and close this item. Grace, thank you so much. Great presentation. Appreciate you coming today, and hopefully we'll see you again. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to our legislative update. Carly, are you here? There you are.
Hey, Mayor Rosner, Washington County Mayors, thank you so much for letting me join you today. For the record, my name is Carly Silva Gabrielson. I'm one of the government relations managers with Washington County. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me one moment. Excellent. So I am here today to give you an update on the state of play with the transportation package. As many of you are probably aware, today it was actually an ideal day to schedule this because we officially have a bill that dropped today, which I'll get into momentarily. But just a quick update on the legislative landscape. As I've been reminding everyone, the target sine die remains to be June 18th, which we are thinking is optimistic at this point. The constitutional sine die is June 29th. So 19 more days. Those are calendar days, not business days, and also including Juneteenth. So we are working with a very narrow window left to pass some very large things in the session, including the transportation bill. As I mentioned, House Bill 2025 was officially filed this morning. In the upcoming slides, I'll get a little bit more into the timeline, but I wanted to dive right into some of the meat of the bill, which I can share does reflect the one-pager that we saw last week released by the committee and the presiding officers and some of the media coverage as well. The big things, the gas tax increase, the proposal was initially 20 cents, but that has been dropped down to 15 cents per gallon with a little bit more of an aggressive phased in timeline. We'll see a 10-cent hike in January 2026 and then an additional 5 cents in 2028. Another thing to flag is the vehicle transfer tax, the new tax on vehicle sales. That was actually segmented. So 2% tax will be implemented on new vehicle sales, and a 1% tax will be on used vehicle sales that are priced over $10,000. The proceeds for that new revenue mechanism are going to go to a new pot of money that it will be used to fund the major projects such as the I-5 Rose Quarter and Abernathy Bridge. And any remaining revenue from the transfer tax will go to the State Highway Trust Fund and allocated on that 50-30-20 split that we've all grown really accustomed to. I also wanted to flag that the road user charge has been maintained and included, which, as we know, is going to start to transition our system of transit away from just the gas tax and create a system in which all users pay their fair share into the system, bringing EVs and hybrid vehicles into the program. The way that it's being phrased is that it's going to be set for passenger vehicles at 5% of the state gas tax per mile. And then for commercial delivery vehicles, it will be 10% of the state gas tax per mile. We're still waiting to see a lot of these financial details. They haven't really been encompassed in the bill itself in terms of how much is going to be raised from each of these buckets. So more details still are waiting. Something else that we can all be really pleased and excited about is that the increase for the payroll tax to fund transit will end up being at 0.3 total. So instead of that initial 0.08 increase, it is going up to 0.3, which is really wonderful. We also have the vehicle privilege tax, and there's great funding for safe streets and safe routes to schools, $250 per biennium for Great Streets, which is a robust program, and $50 million for safe routes. And then again, the anchor projects, that pot of money is going to be $250 per biennium for anchor projects. And that really is the list of the 2017 projects that we were referring to as kind of the unfinished promises from 2017. Those are now being called anchor projects within House Bill 2025. And I'll go ahead and pause and just take questions as they come up. So Mayor Dolan, why don't you go ahead and jump in, sir?
Thank you, Carly. Thanks for the quick update. What about indexing on the gas tax? Is that off the table, or are we going to have to make this lift again in 5 years?
No, indexing the gas tax is included in that. I apologize, I don't have the details on here as I'm going to click through the next slide, but the bill was posted first thing this morning about 8:05 a.m. and the Joint Committee on Transportation Reinvestment held a hearing at 10 o'clock today to introduce the legislative concept as a committee measure. So it's been kind of a fast and furious morning. The bill itself is 102 pages, so our expert staff and many others are really digging in and looking at it. But I can share that, at first glance, it really is a robust bill that will provide a lot of funding to local jurisdictions and really increase safety and fund transit. So I think at the end of the day, while there may be some details that each of our local jurisdictions would like to have be different, I think that it's going to be one that we all can really get behind and champion. So just to finish up the timeline, as I mentioned, the bill was filed this morning, and it's going to be a very, very quick timeline. It's scheduled for the first read of the House floor today, which will then allow the bill to have hearings in the committee. And the first hearing is scheduled this evening, which I'll get into in the next slide, but I'll pause for Mayor Rosner.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the update. We've all been waiting anxiously to see what was going to come out here. As far as the 50-30-20 distribution, there was some chatter in Salem last week about taking, and I'll use your terminology, some of those anchor projects off the top before they did the distribution, which is a clever way of changing the distribution. Are we still protected on the current 50/30/20 distribution in this bill?
Yes, we are. I believe that that pot of money is coming out from ODOT share, those anchor projects, but also being funded by the transfer tax. So those new revenue mechanisms are allowing for that pot of money to kind of be set aside and separate. So yes, the 50/30/20 has been maintained, and I think all advocates have done a really great job at communicating the positive impact of that funding in local jurisdictions. And I think with some of the concerns about accountability, the local jurisdictions have really been able to highlight the wonderful ways that we've partnered with ODOT to deliver on these projects. So thank you for that question.
And then one last question. There was also some discussion around, I think it was coming from a specific representative about that ODOT was spending too much money. I'm kind of paraphrasing, helping local governments out, especially smaller cities with some of their services around engineering, et cetera. Is that still protected and available for our smaller cities?
I believe so, and I'll have to profess, Mayor Rosner, I have done a quick read of the 102-page bill, but I believe that's correct. We'll follow up via email if we find anything problematic. There is one component of the bill that that touches on the scope of projects, and if a city or a county submits changes to the project that changes the scope, there will be a new process for that change to be reviewed by the Oregon Transportation Commission. This was really in reaction to the scope of the I-5 project growing exponentially. So there is definitely a momentum to have more oversight over those instances on when those local projects do grow exponentially. And those are ones that receive federal funding. So certain projects, but we'll follow up via email and share the link to the bill and the link to testify. And then I'll also be sure to highlight that section of the bill that talks about that in particular.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Let me see. I think I have one more slide here.
Can I just add a quick question? Can you explain the 5%, the electric vehicle 5% per mile? Gas tax is about 2 cents a mile, so doesn't make a lot of sense.
I would have to pull up the formula, and let's see. It's 5% of the gas tax, and we'd have to do some math to break it down, but it really is meant to be about equivalent to what passenger vehicles are paying. Of course, if you have a vehicle that gets 50 miles, 60 miles a gallon, you will probably end up paying less than the standard gas tax. But I don't want to get ahead of our figure crunching and our experts looking at the figures.
Yeah, I think it was just the way it was phrased. It was a little confusing.
That's exactly right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Council President Harris.
Thanks. I looked at that too, and I did some quick math, Garrett, and it looked to me like electric vehicles will pay tax equivalent to a car getting 20 miles per gallon.
Thank you for that. And that is what I had heard through word of mouth and was the intended goal, but having not yet crunched those numbers.
Right. So they're going to pay more than most vehicles.
Yeah.
What about plug-in hybrids? What tax? They just pay the gas tax then?
They will be able to pay the road user charge, and that is going to be offered at an annual payment or the per mile payment.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Okay, great. I also just wanted to touch on the ODOT accountability components of the bill. It is right up at the top. Section 1 of the bill talks about some of the accountability components. We are going to be seeing regular performance audits of ODOT. quarterly reporting requirements. There have been some changes. So the governor now has more oversight and responsibility. Particularly the governor will now appoint the director of transportation. That previously was the Oregon Transportation Commission. There is going to be a new oversight committee for major projects to manage the scope and review the progress. And there's going to be further efficiency measures that will be contained within ODOT's budget. So something that there's been definitely a heavy appetite for here in the building and also within the public. And I also just wanted to highlight the public hearing schedule as we currently know it. As I said, this has been fast and furious. So this is what we know as of 1:30 at 1 p.m. today, but it could certainly change. Tonight, we are anticipating that there will be an informal hearing officially walking through House Bill 2025. That's going to be at 5 p.m. and you will be able to watch online. We'll go ahead and send that link. And then tomorrow starts the public hearings. The first one is going to be focused on anchor projects and ODOT accountability, and that's going to start at 5 p.m. And then Wednesday and Thursday, we have been communicated that the hearings will start at 4 p.m. However, I've put an asterisk on those two because there have been some conversation on whether it's going to be 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and they have not posted yet. So just wanted to flag those two. Wednesday will be focused on transit, rail, bike, and ped safety. And then Thursday, of course, operation, maintenance, and preservation. So we really encourage everyone to raise your voice, speak to the needs, speak to the components of this bill. If you're not able to testify virtually or in person, submitting written testimony is certainly valuable. And I think it's gonna take all of us championing this bill to get it across the finish line, given the midnight hour that we're operating in, and just some unforeseen political dynamics that could come up as they always do. So this is your week to champion this bill, to call your legislators, to communicate the needs. And we're really looking forward to getting this across the finish line. So with that, I'll pause and take any other questions.
Thank you very much. Great update on the transportation package. Any questions for Carly?
I like the owl.
Oh.
Well, thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to update you. We'll share some of this material via email, and please reach out if you have any questions about this material as the week advances, or about testifying. I'll be here in person and would look forward to seeing any of you as well.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Next up on our agenda is our regional committee updates. The first one is JPAC. We have any more or Jeff, do you have anything for us? I know we talked already a lot about about this already, but do you have anything for us?
Yeah, I just to be thorough on it, right? We're going to approve some past meeting minutes. See if anybody here has questions or concerns, because the two of them we're voting on is the 82nd Avenue transit project and also the TV Highway transit project. So this is the locally preferred option, asking JPAC to endorse those two projects, 82nd and TV Highway. So see if anyone has questions or comments on for or against us doing that. Okay, seeing none. The other items in the agenda obviously is the regional flexible funds allocation, step one. If anybody has any questions or concerns about that, basically supporting the way that it came through the 88.5 million. And that was basically what presentation we had earlier about flex funds level one. Any questions, concerns? Okay, so I'll be supporting that. And then the U.S. Department of Transportation certificate review of the Portland MPO. So any feedback, questions, concerns about that? I know that's affecting basically the way SMART's request to be representative on the table is basically saying, no, stand behind TriMet. there's a few other things. I don't know if Commissioner Rosenthal or anybody else has comment on the research for the MPO.
It's not my idea on the resolution of the TriMet Smart issue, but I don't have any leverage over this issue.
Okay.
And my mayor, I think the mayor of Wilsonville is would be concerned.
Yeah.
Sean's got his hand up. Sure.
Go ahead, Sean.
We plan to be testifying in the public comment on this in a couple of days on this. And I have written testimony ready to go as well. So we have concerns. I mean, I can't spell out those concerns. Dwight's not here, that our transit person today is on vacation. But our relationship with TriMet and how that's being handled, we do have some concerns.
And I think I understand that, Sean. I think that my concern is probably more aligned to the larger of, I'm not sure that the agency should be voting members of the MPO, but that's not my decision. I think they should be like our staff, right? There's somebody that gives us counsel, they give us good feedback, they talk about the impacts of the policy. But I think the decision should be made up to the electeds, not to the appointeds. So that's and then not having SMART have its own voice or some kind of representation for all of the small area transits and trying to make that just all come through TriMet. I don't feel like that's the greatest answer either. So anyone have questions or concerns about what Sean and I are talking about for transportation representation at JPAC? Transit, I should say, transit representation. Okay. Thanks, Sean, for speaking up. Anybody else on that? Kind of covers the JPAC update, Chair Russner.
Okay, great. Thank you. It sounds like you're all set. Unless Commissioner Fye or Mayor Lube had anything to add.
I don't have anything to add to Mayor.
Okay.
You covered it all.
Awesome. All right. And the next is MPAC. Mayor Pace isn't here. We had our last meeting on the 28th. We got to see the climate action plan presented at that meeting as well. They've got a presentation on the Montgomery Park streetcar LPA, which is up for a vote and impact, I think, in the June meeting, and then we have some additional projects that are coming in July that will be reviewed through impact. So nothing huge going on there. We also had a regional housing coordination strategy meeting or update in the last meeting as well. So, are there? And I guess I'll. Mayor DeLynn, did you have any comments from the meeting, especially on the Montgomery streetcar project?
That I can repeat. I'm not a big fan of it. The thing I do think is very interesting about that Montgomery streetcar project is the leveraging that they're using on the zoning and development. I think that's really an interesting tool for the public-private partnerships. Maybe we haven't done enough of that or looked into those opportunities in our areas. But I think whether you think it's a great project or you think it's more Portland-centric, I think some of those ideas they use are interesting on a way to control the land around the development and make it go in the direction that you want. And I think maybe that's something we could all learn from, is how they're leveraging that. There could be a whole entire, maybe that's something to bring back to this team, Tim.
Yep.
It's an opportunity for us to have kind of a lessons learned. How did they do this? How do you move forward? Because I think we all have the same kind of issues and concerns around land development and trying to make sure that if we're making a plan that it can go forward with those public-private partnerships and the dedications and the legal strings to tie it all together. So maybe that's something for a future agenda for this group.
I think that's a great idea. I just made a note of that. I'm sure Stephen did too.
Stephen's like, great, Jeff's giving me ARs and you're not even the chair anymore.
No, I think that's a great idea because yeah, they had some interesting concepts that they were using for that project, and we'll be acting on that. Is there any? I thought it was I agree. I thought it was a Portland centric project as well. Um, for them, it's great. I was surprised at the number of jobs they expected to create, although um, we didn't get a lot of detail on what kind of jobs those are. So it'd be interesting to see more information on that. But any thoughts from the rest of you on that particular project that is before impact? Oh,
I'll just
go ahead.
comment. If I represented Portland, I would say it was a well thought out project and something that Portland could easily benefit from. Since I represent Washington County, I'm a little more skeptical of it, but I am reminded of the fact that Portland still is a strong economic driver and and maybe even more perceptions of what's going on in Portland. I'm hoping that project will lead to a stronger national and regional perception of Portland as getting past the some of the problems that it's had in the past. So I'm hopeful that it'll add psychologically, even though even though it doesn't do much for us out here in Washington County. But I'm glad that everybody is pretty much consistent on the on package 3 for the RIFA.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the Region 1 Act update. Who would like to start?
Oh, I can just talk about kind of what was on the agenda. We had a summer construction update, which was nice to hear about all the stuff going on around the region. And then we went into a transit series discussion where we had planning for transit service in rural and urban areas of Region 1. And so we had a City of Sandy, the transit director, we had the TriMet director of planning and policy, and the Metro senior transportation planner. So it was just a really good general discussion.
Mayor Wenzel, did you have any thoughts or additional comments? Oh, I forgot Mayor Wenzel had to leave. Oh, no. Stephanie, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to offer, I can definitely bring the West Side projects to next month's WCCC if people are interested, or I can bring the whole presentation if that's helpful. Maybe just some food for thought.
Okay, we can, the coordinating committee for this committee, we will coordinate with you on that. And I think Mayor Delen's suggestion was really good. We'd like to learn more about some of those tools that they used around zoning and for the Portland project. So I'm sorry, I'm back on the other meeting. I apologize.
I was like, ooh, I can try to find someone.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Yes, we will reach out to you and see about bringing that in. So sorry, I got 3 things going on here. And then Mayor Bubenek, did you have anything to add?
Just going off what Mayor Lube just said, there were some questions that were left unanswered about the bus and shoulder project between Tualatin and Oregon City. That is going to be kicking in fairly shortly, about the dates on the slides of how far is it going to go, because on the slide it only went partially to Clackamas Town Center, and there wasn't an answer on it's just a phased project. So hopefully if Stephanie brings this back to WCCC, those questions will be answered on the bus and shoulder project and how far it's going to go, or are there multiple phases, and when can we expect to be completed, in conjunction with TriMet and SMART and ODOT.
Awesome, thank you. All righty, any questions for the R1 Act team? Well, hearing none, we'll move on to other business and agency updates. Does anyone have any updates? Stephen?
Chair, we forgot to mention it during the legislative update, but now that we actually have a bill, we had shared with all of you members via email an op-ed.
Thank you.
And would like to review that now that the bill is actually out, and we'll circulate an updated draft around to you all. We did have majority support last time to release it, but based on conversations with Carly, we opted to hold off as negotiations continued. So now that it's back, we'll review that for any updates that might be needed and circulate it back out to you all, similar to last time. Just looking for a quick email response if you support endorsing it on behalf of the committee.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Anyone else have any updates they'd like to give?
I'd just be remiss not to continue to beat the drum. I'm concerned about increasing registration fees and the impact on the economically disadvantaged, but I don't think it's worth tipping over the whole apple cart of this program to fight for that. So I think that feedback's been given to our legislators. They're doing the best deal they can. I think the ball that falls on our court then is, what does Washington County do with our registration? Do we ratchet it up also, or do we hold where we are and try to maintain some relief from the state increase? So I just want to put that in people's thinking caps. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. Any other updates or comments? And Stephen, do we have anything else? Just make sure I didn't miss anything.
No, I appreciated and was writing notes about those potential future agenda topics. So thank you all for sharing those. This is also the time on the agenda when anyone has any other ideas for future agenda topics. We'd love to get those from you. And if not, you can feel free to email them back to Teresa Gartner or myself afterward, and we'll try to schedule those into the future agenda calendar. And I would encourage folks, if you're so inclined, it would be great to have some local county presence at the hearings that are coming up this week on the transportation package too.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Jeff, Marilyn.
Hey, travel expand your mind. And I was in the, I may not look like it, but I just got back from the Grand Canyon. I noticed something in the Southwest, and I'm not sure how it would apply for us, but they don't, not only do they have bus on shoulder, they have bus stop. So like dedicated pullouts at an on-ramp or an off-ramp that allows the buses to come up, pick people up after it crosses the highway and then continue down. So I don't know if we've thought about anything like that, of using part of our state highway or federal highway spaces for bus stops. You know, because right now we fight and we build so much within the main right of way of our, like, TV Highway 82nd, that, and we're expanding into the bus on shoulder program. I'm just wondering if we thought about that, because I saw that and I was like, wow, that's kind of neat. It has its own dedicated lane. They pull off, people can get on and off. It just, I didn't know if we thought about something like that or if there was an application. But when you travel, you see different things, and apparently I'm a transportation geek, so I saw that.
So that was actually on the on-ramp?
Yeah, so literally as you went onto the on-ramp, there was a pulled off dedicated lane for the bus and a nice fully facilitated bus stop with shade and misters and the whole thing down in the Phoenix area, where you could catch the bus, and it was part of their bus on the highway, bus on the shoulder program of that Phoenix metropolitan area. So I just thought it was something interesting and didn't know if there were an application here, but for it, just thinking out of the box, right, as a dedicated way.
Well, since we're talking about cool transportation ideas, we're looking at a potential change in our flow of traffic in downtown Sherwood, and we have an intersection that has an interesting dynamic with railroad tracks, and we found this solution where you actually run the railroad track through the center of a traffic circle. And it's being done in multiple states. There's none in Oregon yet, but I'm sure when we bring the idea up with ODOT, their brains will explode. But it's an interesting solution for solving challenges with intersections and railroad tracks. So, all right. Any other thoughts, comments, neat ideas people are seeing out there? Well, with that, I don't see anything. I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff, for coordinating and helping put the meeting together. Appreciate it. Carly, if you're still on, thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
See you.